Remember this video which was made during the Delhi riots, in which a few policemen are seen beating Muslim men and forcing them to chant slogans? Faizan, a 23-year-old man seen in this video, was kept in illegal detention and died the next day. The police investigations have failed to arrest the accused till date. The prosecution says that the video is blurred, thus the identity of the policeman cannot be confirmed. When history will look back at the worst communal riots since partition in Delhi, it is the failure of investigating agencies to conduct proper investigation by using latest scientific methods will surely torment the sentinels of democracy. These words are not mine. It's what the Sessions Court observed while granting bail to an accused in one of the Delhi riots cases. Under scrutiny here is the incongruity of the prosecution narrative in the investigation of the various cases pertaining to the riots. A narrative which, if weren't true, could make for a great dark comedy. Unfortunately, in question are many fabricated cases wherein some of them Muslims have been accused of joining members of the Hindu community in beating Muslims by the Delhi police. These and many such frightening yet true observations were revealed in a fact-finding report on the Northeast Delhi riots of February 2020. This fact-finding panel was headed by former Supreme Court Judge Justice Madan B. Lokur. It concluded that the Union Home Ministry delayed deploying additional forces in the violent hit areas even as the communal riots continued unabated between February 23 and 26, 2020. It also says that government of Delhi, headed by Arvind Kejriwal, did precious little during this entire time to mediate between the communities, even with the sharp warning signs in the lead up to the February 23. These are some serious revelations that point fingers towards the police, the media and the government of India itself. Thus, these revelations deserve a closer look to understand how India's capital was subjected to communal violence for 3 straight days. The report states, and I quote, "In this attempt to alter social relations, Muslim identity and agency stand noticeably diminished. This is an inevitable outcome of a politics of hate becoming embedded in the social fabric." This 170-page long document puts forward a linear and precise narrative of the riots that occurred in Northeast Delhi. Despite the report only carrying documented facts, it makes a chilling impact by the way it binds all the things together and presents a dark picture of the democracy in India. So let's get into the details of the report. The composition of the committee authoring the report consists of these former judges whose names are on your screen right now. The aim of the report is to assess the manner of the investigation and evidence on the basis of well-established principles of criminal law and evidence law, and offer an opinion on the quality of the investigation conducted so far. The report examines different facets of the violence, its genesis, nature and aftermath. Part 1 sets the context of the amendments to the citizenship law, analyzes the build-up to the violence and its trajectory, and talks about the state's response as it unfolded. Part 2 of this report assesses the role played by sections of television and social media in channeling polarized narratives before and after the violence. Part 3 contains the legal analysis of the Delhi police investigations into the violence and of larger implications of the use of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, which is the UAPA. We shall summarize some of the important bits of the document in this video. The first part of the report takes us back in time to the passing of the CAA, or the Citizenship Amendment Act, and the protests that followed in December 2019. The report stresses on the ills of the CAA and how the law becomes even more dangerous when understood in the context of NRC, or the National Register of Citizens. It says so by pointing out that the NRC in Assam shows the requirement to prove citizenship can result in the disenfranchisement of large groups of people. It says that under the perpetrate cover of the CAA, non-Muslims who are unable to reproduce the required documents to prove their citizenship in order to be enlisted in the NRC can be accepted as refugees and given citizenship. Going by this logic, Muslims alone would be left with the onerous burden to prove that they are Indian citizens. The anti-CAA protests began in New Delhi and spread to various parts of the country. The protests were an offshoot of a violent crackdown of the students of Jamia Millia Islamia, which is a very well documented fact. These protests were subject to constant scrutiny by the national media and the spokespersons and politicians of the ruling party. The period after December 2019 during the anti-CAA protests have been flagged by Facebook researchers as a period in which inflammatory content, mostly targeted at Muslims, rose by 300% on the platform. These protests were used to create an anti-Muslim rhetoric during the Delhi election of 2020. This was clear from the social media posts of various leaders of Bharatiya Janata Party and its sister organizations. The report makes a thorough study of 6 mainstream news channels and also does an extensive study of the social media accounts of various Hindutva leaders. It also points out various instances from Indian television news where the anti-CAA protesters were referred to in a derogatory manner. The period from December 2019 to February 2020 witnessed events and developments which signaled a growing and incessant vilification of the anti-CAA protesters and thus of the anti-CAA sentiment as a whole. Now, why is the mention of CAA important? Because as per the report, the BJP's divisive narrative is seen as a crucial link between the contestation against the CAA and the communal violence that followed. Now comes 22nd February, when women protesting in the Seelampur Jafrabad area blocked the road outside the Jafrabad metro station on the night of February 22. In turn, this led to mobilization against this protest site. Till now, all the demonstrations were by and large peaceful, with a handful instances like a Hindu extremist shooting at anti-CAA protesters, etc. The decisive time of February 23 running into February 24 witnessed frenzied and wide use of social media. Kapil Mishra, famous for giving a provocative, communally charged speech in the presence of a police person on the night of February 23, tweeted that Pakistani rioters have captured Delhi streets. Meanwhile, Yati Narsinanand said these statements in the videos on his YouTube channel. What were the statements? When your religion needs, you should fight a war. And to pick up arms for religion is not a paap but punya, which means it's not a sin but a virtue. All Hindus must stand with Kapil and Gopal, who showed the courage to fight Shaheen Bagh. Support these warriors and fight Islam. These were the statements by the leader. Now Anjali Verma, who says she is affiliated with BJP, on her Facebook page posted, and I quote, "Prepare for the civil war. Only then will the skull cap wearing mullahs learn their lesson." In another Facebook live video from Mojpur Chowk on February 23, Ragini Tiwari said, and I quote, "Enough attacks on Hinduism. We won't tolerate such attacks anymore. Hindus come out, die or kill," she says. "Rest shall be seen later. If your blood hasn't boiled even now, it's not blood, but it's water." The report also details testimonies from victims and survivors of the Delhi riots. We won't go into the details of the enormity of the violence, but will quickly go through the timeline of what happened in the 4 days. So, on the night of 22nd February, men and women blocked Jafrabad metro station's main road against the CAA. On 23rd February's morning, political and Hindutva figures mobilized pro-CAA supporters to face off against the new protest site. On the same afternoon, Kapil Mishra tweets to supporters to gather at Mojpur Chowk at 3 p.m. near Jafrabad protest site. Kapil Mishra gives an ultimatum to police to clear anti-CAA protest sites at Mojpur. Stone pelting breaks out between pro-CAA and anti-CAA groups across Mojpur and Jafrabad. On the same evening, armed mobs appear on the streets. Incidents of Muslims being frisked and beaten are reported. Now, the 24th February. The morning of 24th February saw stone pelting and clashes intensify between Jafrabad and Mojpur, arson and violence in Chandbagh, leading to the death of Head Constable Ratan Lal. Throughout the day, there was assault on 5 Muslim men in Kardampuri by the police, the video of which was shown at the beginning of this program. Attack on schools in Shivvihar, burning of Tyre Market and Mosque in Gokulpuri, violence at Karawal Nagar, Mustafabad, Khajuri Khas, Gonda, Gambri and Yamuna Vihar. On the same evening, Delhi police pronounces curfew orders in affected areas. 5 deaths were reported so far. Now, on the night between 24 and 25th February, the Kattar Hindu Ekta WhatsApp group forms to plan violence throughout the day of 25th February. The attacks on mosques in Khajuri, Ashoknagar, Gamri, Brijpuri, continued arson of Gokulpuri Tire Market. And on the night of 25th February, Delhi police gives shoot at sight orders. Stone pelting and clashes in Babarpuri, Brahmpuri, Karaval Nagar and Bhajanpura were also reported, with the news of deaths being 13. On the same midnight, emergency hearing by Delhi High Court for safe passage of ambulance out to Northeast Delhi comes. On the morning of 26 February, Ankit Sharma's dead body found at a drain in Chandbagh. He was the Intelligence Bureau staffer. National Security Advisor tours affected areas of Northeast Delhi and declares the area under control. Through the day, police forcibly clears anti-CA protest site at Khajuri Khas. There are attacks on Madarsa in Brijpuri. The Delhi High Court now directs police to decide within 24 hours on registration of FIRs against politicians for hate speech. Now, 11 dead bodies are recovered from drains over the next few days. That was a quick timeline of a gruesome violence that Delhi was subjected to for more than 3 days. The report has made a thorough study and found that a group named Kattar Hindu Ekta and its members were responsible for inciting violence at many places. The Wire had also reported on the same. The report is also critical of Arvind Kejriwal and his government in Delhi's assembly. The report states, and I quote, "It becomes clear that state institutions were largely absent during the days of violence in providing relief. Victims experienced a lack of access to treatment and gaps in the handing over of hospital and medical care records. Absence of information and procedural hurdles made access to compensation even more difficult." It also states that Delhi government's legal team was also of little help to the victims. Now, let's move on to the final part of the report, and arguably the most shocking part too. In this section, we will see how the Delhi police not only let the violence carry on for a little longer, but also fabricated cases to suit the divisive narrative. Of the total 758 FIRs registered in the Delhi riots case, 695 cases are being investigated by Northeast District police stations, 62 cases by 3 special investigative teams constituted by the crime branch, and FIR 59 by the Delhi Police Special Cell. It has to be noted that about 50% cases have been concluded, and the information used in the report is mostly taken from the various orders of the judiciary. Courts have found identification by police witnesses to be unreliable due to the unaccounted delay in their naming and identifying of assailants. Recurring unexplained delays have led courts to flag the possibility of these witnesses being planted only to implicate the accused. For example, in Devangana Kalita versus State of NCT of Delhi, the High Court noted that an unexplained delay of more than 2 months by witnesses to name the accused, who was present since December 2019, rendered this testimony suspect. Similarly, in State vs Khalid Saifi and State vs Umar Khalid, the court has made similar observations. In law, witnesses who came forward after considerable delay and are unable to explain the reason for this delay are considered unreliable. In Firoz Khan vs State, the Delhi High Court, while granting bail, questioned the very presence of the police constable at the scene of crime. The CCTV and the call data records analysis by courts also present a different story than what was being proposed by the Delhi police. In some cases, where CCTV footage or videos have been submitted by the police, courts have found them unreliable, as the police have presented footage where the accused is not visible. In other cases where the accused is visible in the videos, the footage presented does not show them carrying out violent criminal acts or inciting violence. Courts have also commented on the unsubstantiated inclusion of grave IPC offences only to prejudice the accused. In Umar Khalid's case, the court points out that the case reflects non-application of mind by the police, going to the extent of vindictiveness. Another example is of Sharjeel Imam, where despite being in custody 1 month prior to the riots, Sharjeel Imam was arrested in FIR 59, 6 months after the violence. These reports will only become serious as we read further. Some allegations by the police seem implausible. like the one where they had accused an imam burning down a mosque, or the Delhi High Court pointing out the absurdity of the accused persons causing communal riots by killing persons of their own community. Further, the police appeared to have omitted certain instances of hate speech made by Ragini Tiwari and Kapil Mishra. Delhi police refused to register FIRs against several highly publicized instances of hate speech and criminal intimidation. The court, while granting bail to various people under the IPC cases, said that the investigation process reflected police's, and I quote, callous, negligent and lackadaisical attitude. Now, the cases pertaining to IPC were dealt with precision by the courts, although the cases where UAPA was invoked were the most difficult to understand, as UAPA deals with terrorism. The standard for bail for a terrorist act under the UAPA is far more stringent than the threshold for bail application for IPC offences. The next part will be dealt very carefully, as we do not wish to give a verdict on the cases that may be prejudicial. We only mean to debate the facts that are in the public domain. In its charge sheet, the special cell claims that the accused person conspired to execute riots as a means of forcing the government to repeal the CA. In many instances pointed out in the report, the police witnesses as well as the public witnesses were deemed unreliable by the courts. Now this is important. The court said some of the witnesses were unreliable. Now, here I will quote some strong words by the court regarding the UAPA cases. Listen to it very carefully. And I quote, "It has been a recurrent theme repeatedly urged by the state that what was contemplated and in fact brought to fruition was not a typical protest but an aggravated protest which was intended to disrupt the life of the community in Delhi. We find ourselves unpersuaded and unconvinced with this submission, since we find it is not found on any specific factual allegation, and we are of the view that the mere use of alarming and hyperbolic verbiage in the subject charge sheet will not convince us otherwise. In fact, upon a closer scrutiny of the submissions made on behalf of the state, we find that the submissions are based upon inferences drawn by the prosecuting agency and not upon factual allegations. The court had also dismissed a chili powder theory that was floated by the police, claiming that a few hundred women came from Shaheen Bagh in a bus and made use of chili powder. This claim fell flat, as an older police record mentions stalking the Shaheen Bagh women, but it does not mention any instances involving chili powder. The discrepancy doesn't end here. The disclosure statement of accused persons are uncannily similar. For instance, Miran Haidar's disclosure statement recorded on April 8, 2020 and Safura Zargar's disclosure statement recorded on April 14, 2020 are word by word copies of each other, barring the difference in the name. The report, in conclusion about the discrepancy in police investigation, says that the material in the special cell's charge sheet does not credibly canvass the proposition that persons advocating the repeal of the CAA intend to strike terror in the Hindu community. Finally, it talks about the UAPA law itself and makes an appeal to relook in the existing structure of the law. The report calls use of UAPA as an abuse of law. Why is that so? The high threshold for bail, combined with extended custody of the accused and the phenomenon of staggered arrest, ensure that the UAPA accused are subjected to indefinite incarceration without trial. The report cites many examples where innocent people face jail time due to the wrongful use of UAPA. For example, 120 people who were accused of being members of the band outfit Simi were acquitted after spending 20 years in jail. There are a number of instances where innocent people had to languish in Indian jails. Not just UAPA, but other laws like TADA, POTA and MCOCA are also responsible for the status quo. The committee urges the state to frame a law towards establishing accountability for miscarriages of justice arising through the unjustified application of criminal offences, not just through the UAPA, to persecute individuals. It also says that such a law must have a provision to provide monetary compensation. That's it for now in the summary of this very fine document about the Delhi riots of 2020. There are many facts in this document that were not touched upon but are equally shocking. Listeners wanting to read the full report can find the link of the report in the description below. My name is Zishan Kaskar and you were watching The Wire. Namaskar.